the director and founder of Young People Mental Health Trust, and welcome to our show, which we call Tap In, whereby we are going to discuss issues to do with suicide. So to start our series today, we are going to look on the overview of suicide. So today on the panelists, we have Dr. Machinga, and also we have Dr. Mutambara. We are going to discuss on the overview of suicide. We first discuss on definition of suicide and what makes adolescents more vulnerable, and also discussing factors that associate with suicide and the signs that someone is suicidal. So to our show, we have Dr. Machinga with line. Dr. Machinga, can you introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Tawanda. My name is Dr. Mazvita Machinga. I am a psychotherapist and a mental health consultant, and I'm from Mutare. I work at Africa University in the College of Social Sciences, and I do work with young people, and I offer psychological and emotional support to people who are in distress.
Okay, thank you. So for us to go into our series, we need to discuss a brief, like what is suicide? What do you understand by the term suicide?
Suicide is a term that refers to a situation when someone harms themselves with the possible intent to end their life. Basically, that's what suicide is. And people do attempt suicide, and there are various reasons why people do that, varied and complex reasons. But it's an act whereby someone harms themselves with possibly an intent to end someone's life. That's what we call suicide.
Okay. Thank you so much. So we are going to also discuss about what makes adolescents more vulnerable. And I was actually reading through from Dr. Sirima's presentation. He highlighted issues to do with family as another factor that can actually make adolescents more vulnerable. So he actually highlighted the issues to do with communication among family members, and also issues to do with history. Maybe someone committed suicide in the family. And also he highlighted the issue to do with a problem at school. And also he highlighted the issues to do with some interpersonal relationships, breakups, the death of the loved ones is some of the factors that actually that makes adolescents more vulnerable. So what do you agree?
Yes, indeed, I do. Actually, I work with a lot of people who have attempted suicide from our local healthcare institutions. And one of the things that I do is to really sit down with them, those who have attempted suicide, right? Because many times those who have already completed suicide won't be able to talk to them because they are already gone. But we have an opportunity to discuss with people who have attempted suicide and maybe they haven't been successful to actually complete those suicide. And amongst this, I also meet young people, quite a number of young people. Of late, we actually have an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old who actually completed suicide and who also attempted suicide. So indeed, this is a very fatal, self-injurious act whereby a person engages himself in. So young people are also seen doing that. I agree with Dr. Zirima that there are quite a number of reasons why adolescents can end up thinking of wanting to kill themselves. and we know that, for instance, the disruptive, psychosocial, and adverse socio-economic effects or adverse childhood experiences. When a child is suffering so much, like the one that I just told you, this child has been suffering a lot, and this child is the one who decided to say it's enough. I can't keep on suffering. I need to go because this is just enough for me. So they were having a lot of what we call adverse childhood experiences. They were having a lot of issues with their parents, with their poverty in their family. And so the child killed themselves. So real serious childhood adverse experiences. And also even those are coming from home. Some of the adverse experiences which adolescents experience are coming from school. If there's a lot of bullying at school, even they are coming amongst their peers, if there's a lot of name calling and things like that. Family history of suicide is also a very significant risk factor. And we also have general stressful life, loss of maybe even their parents, loss of people who can care for them, so that they end up not knowing what to do. Peer pressure can also be another source in terms of risk factors for the young people. But overall, we see that there is that some element of emotional pain. There is some element of some emotional pain somewhere, psychological pain somewhere, which then causes a person to want to run away from that pain through dying.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the highlights. I think we just covered the why adolescents are more vulnerable in committing suicide. So now we are moving on to your topic, which is factors associated with higher risk of suicide. What are those factors? You highlighted factors, risk factors to deal with community, societal, individual oriented. Can you actually go deeper into those factors?
I think the main factor that leads somebody to finally complete suicide, from my experience with over 500 people who have attempted suicide, is that the first thing is the suicide ideation itself. Just when someone has a suicide thought, the suicide ideation itself can be a big driver to make someone start to think of, okay, what can I use to die? When would I want to die? How am I going to want to die? So the suicide ideation is a driver. But then we go backwards and say, what is causing that person to have the suicide ideation? Because when I was doing my research with the people who attempted suicide, I noticed that all of them, the thought itself is something that is very, very paramount in each one of them. And then what is causing the thought, even if the little one thinks I want to die, this 15-year-old boy is like, I want to die, from nowhere. It doesn't come from nowhere. So there are factors now that can actually make people vulnerable. One of the biggest factor was suffering. When someone is going through some suffering, emotional suffering, psychological suffering, and nobody wants to suffer, especially pain. If there is some kind of pain, something is going on, maybe a lot of ill treatment, a lot of physical abuse, a lot of sexual abuse, a lot of emotional abuse, and it's just hitting you every day. That pain alone can make someone feel hopeless, helpless, feel stuck. They don't know what to do. The pain is so unbearable. They can't carry it. It's like a heavy thing. So as a result of that, a person would want to run away from the pain. So loneliness is also another factor, especially to adults. To young people, we also see that again. We also know that cognitive, what we call cognitive constriction, like when someone doesn't know what to do. Their mind is just narrowed. They have no option. They can't see any option. They've tried, they've shared their problems with friends. Maybe they've shared with some relatives. They've shared with teachers, but nobody seems to be doing anything. They are still in this vulnerable, adverse, painful context. So at the end of the day, they are so stuck, they are narrow. They thought maybe the only way is to die. So those are some of the things that I've seen as factors or risk factors against suicide ideation, which is exacerbated or which is coming from all these various factors that we have talked about.
Okay, Dr. Mutambara, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Tawanda. How are you?
I'm fine. So we're just discussing about what is suicide, and also we also touches on the what makes adolescents more vulnerable. And Dr. Machinga was just highlighting issues to do with factors associated with higher risk of suicide.
Okay.
Yes. So I think now we are moving on to your topic. And I also have questions for Dr. Machinga. Like, let's say someone identify a person with suicide symptoms. How do we deal with such a situation?
Thank you so much. One of the most important things that I've learned is that suicide ideation is not a one-day thing. Like somebody just wake up today and just say, I'm just waking up, I'm just going to kill myself. No, that's not what happens. It's a process. A person will suffer, will endure the pain, and many times maybe they start talking about, you know what, one day I want to die. Just having that kind of narrative in their life of thinking of wanting to die. And so what is very important is when people start to hear their relatives, their surroundings, just talking about wanting to die, you don't want to take that lightly. You want to engage the person. You want to listen to what they are saying. You want to sit down with them and say, you have been talking lately, you have been talking about wanting to die, wanting to die. We have been hearing these narratives in your speech. What's going on? What's happening? So listening and taking whatever they are saying seriously and being able to refer them to professionals now who can be able to process on that point. The most of the reason why people end up really completing the suicide is just because sometimes people take it lightly. They think, no, I don't think they are going to die. They are just joking. They are not going to die. They are just joking. Important for people to be able to understand that when someone is talking about it, let's engage them. Let's show care and concern. Let's not brush what they are saying. Say, oh, you want to threaten us, and I've heard people saying that. So that's very important. And also when we see a behavior change in our children, they're starting to withdraw themselves from others, they're starting to maybe use substances a lot, such kind of things. Those are some of the things that we need to watch. And once we do that, we engage them and then we refer them for professional help.
But can you lead us on signs that someone is suicidal? What are those signs? Oh, we lost her. We just lost her.
Maybe I can say a little bit before I leave.
Okay.
There are different signs of, as we say, when someone is just talking about that, right? That's a big sign, right? And then we also see that sometimes when someone is starting to do a certain behavior that we have never experienced, all of a sudden they've changed in the way they talk and in the way they relate to people, or they are starting to engage in risky behaviors, like driving the car very fast, doing such kind of risky behaviors. that is also something that can show that someone is starting to need to be engaged.
Yeah,
I think Dr. Mutambara is back, and I would leave this time for her. And may you please allow me to log out.
okay, it's fine, Doc. Thank you so much for your time.
You are welcome.
Dr. Mutambara, can you lead us on signs that someone is suicidal?
Okay, thank you very much, Tawanda. I heard Dr. Machinga touching on some of those signs that show us that someone is suicidal. As a background, it has been shown that up to 70% of people who end up attempting suicide would have given a certain warning sign. But it's unfortunate that people are not able to pick these warning signs. But it has been shown that up to 70% of people give out some sort of warning. So we want to look at these warning signs, these warning behaviors that people portray, and that then lead them to committing suicide or attempting suicide. Firstly, I would want to say suicide is usually is in most cases a culmination or the end point of several disorders. So we are saying someone ends up attempting suicide as a result of suffering from a number of disorders. For example, depression. Someone may be depressed and they end up attempting suicide. So we need to know the signs or the symptoms of these various mental disorders that then culminate into suicide. Find that with depression, individual may experience hopelessness. They may start saying, I don't know why I should live. I don't know my purpose in life. Or they may say, I am useless. That is a sign that such a person is suffering from depression. They may withdraw from other people. They may isolate themselves, staying alone, locked in their rooms for a bigger part of the day. That is again a sign of suicide and a sign that someone is depressed. Also, under depression, you may find that someone no longer engages in activities that he or she once found pleasurable. You may find that someone used to like going to church every Sunday, but because of things that may be happening at that particular time, for example, as Dr. Machinga said, traumatic experiences like losing your loved one, you may find that someone is no longer coming to church. It's a sure sign that someone is depressed, and that can lead to suicide attempt. So we need to look out for these signs. They are out there. For example, if you have a church project that you are no longer seeing it, you may want to approach them and ask them what's happening, what's going on. You may have someone who you used to go with to play soccer. or any other game, but that person is no longer available. They are no longer attending. You want to find out from them what will be happening. So withdrawal from activities that were once pleasurable for an individual, it's a sign of depression, and it's a sure sign that someone may end up attempting suicide. Still on depression, you may find that someone may say to you, I'm just having these negative thoughts. I'm failing to control my thoughts. That is a symptom of depression. And when someone harbors those negative thoughts, they may end up attempting suicide, because the negative thoughts will be telling that person that you are not important, your future is doomed. So let's say someone was raped. They may end up dreaming about the rape. Even when they are seated, they may actually see visions of the rape. They may keep on thinking about the rape episode. So if someone tells you, you or she experience a traumatic on again and again, it's a sign that that person may end up attempting suicide. So as I said, when suicide signs are almost same as signs of the many disorders that we have. So, as I said, the person may end up attempting suicide because they are either depressed, either they are experiencing PTSD, and for one to be depressed, most of the time they've gone through a stressful event. Dr. Machinga touched on those stressful events. For now, I can end here if there are any more questions.
Okay. Let's say I have someone that I know who sleeps at 12 p.m. midnight, unemployed, easily annoyed, and he actually seems unstable. Are those signs, or should we take those things seriously, or we just ignore?
Okay, my answer would be yes and no. The
Okay.
yes is this person is a risk factor for suicide. One of the risk factors is that someone is unemployed. So you want to assess how the person is coping with the unemployment. Remember, we don't want to just generalize. You can have someone who is not employed, but they're a student. Someone who is not employed, they are hopeful about the future. But when that person who is unemployed now ends up being hopeless, like telling you that I will never do anything right in my life. I'm not of any value in my life. I wish I was dead. That is a point at suicide. So generally we are saying it's not just an unemployment. It's a whole lot of other factors that may make an individual prone to attempting suicide. I liked what you talked about. You said that person may be sleeping at 12 midnight. I usually talk about not just insomnia, but also I talk about quality of sleep. I've had people who sleep at 12 midnight and they wake up at 7 a.m. That is not a problem. That is not a problem. You want to look at, I usually use hours of continuous sleep to gauge whether someone's sleep pattern is a problem or not. I usually say 6 hours of continuous sleep is okay. And you want to find out what the person will be doing also from maybe 8 to 12. Maybe some people will be occupying themselves with movies and other things. So sleep disturbances, yes, they do point to suicide, but there's need for further assessment. Over to you, Tawanda. Any other question?
Okay, thank you for highlighting that one. And also, let's say we have a child who actually angered by, we have a child who's like, when he's angered or she's angered, she's threatened to kill herself. What can you do to help? Is it a sign that someone will commit suicide, or just threats? How do we know? How do you know that we are dealing with threats or we are dealing with the real suicide ideation?
Okay. Thank you very much, Tawanda. As I said, 70% of people who end up attempting suicide would have alluded to it or given some warning signs. We don't take any mention about suicide lightly. If someone tells you that they are thinking of killing themselves, it's a red robot, according to how I see and the clients that I have dealt with. It's a red robot. You need to stop there and get help for the person. Usually people who end up attempting suicide would have talked about it to some people. And it's unfortunate in our African, I don't know if I should say African or in everyday life as human beings, sometimes we just belittle talks about suicide. When someone says, I feel like I may end up killing myself, you hear people saying, it's your life. If you die, we'll just bury you. Go ahead. Like, we really don't see that. It's a red flag. And also, maybe to add on to that, people who attempt suicide are at a higher risk of reattempting suicide. Statistics have shown that above 40% of people who attempt suicide are most likely to attempt suicide again. So if someone that you know has attempted suicide, you need to look out for that person. You need to really reach out, because that person is 40% more likely to attempt suicide again. And we have had people who have attempted suicide 3 times, 4 times, 6 times, and as many as 8 times. So first attempt is also another warning sign.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Doc. I think we have covered everything concerning the overview of suicide. Thank you for your time. I think we will actually meet you in the next series.
Okay, thank you very much for having me.
Okay, thank you so much. So today we discussed issues to do with suicide. We covered the overview of suicide. We covered issues to do why youth are the most vulnerable when it comes to suicide. We also covered signs that someone is on higher risk of committing suicide. And Dr. Mutambara just gave us a brief on how to identify those signs on when someone is actually trying to kill him or herself. So, wow, actually, we learned a lot about suicide. So we just need to thank our presenters today, Dr. Mazvita Machinga and Dr. Juliet Mutambara. Thank you so much for your time. Meet you next week.